Thank you. So I see that the room did clear out because we are very close to lunchtime, but thank you all for sticking around. Let's ignore some of the tummy rumblings because I think the next topic is going to be quite interesting, one that everyone's talking about in the industry. It's going to be ISO and what's coming next. So when we think about what's coming in November 2026, I think Colony Wu, who's our prior panelist, did mention that a lot of banks and a lot of institutions were investing heavily in ISO and the readiness for ISO. That is not ending. There's still a lot more coming ahead. And when I think about the next milestone in November 2026, and we talk about hybrid address, that is a massive undertaking. So just for everyone's awareness, I'm sure we've all heard about it. Many might have ignored it, which we should not be ignoring the topic. But in November 2026, unstructured free text address is going to be decommissioned, and many infrastructure, so Swift, chips, Fedwire, will begin mandating structured address in a hybrid format. So today, we are joined by a group of experts who, like many in the room, are also navigating this change in real time. Maybe not near real time, but real time. So for introductions, my name is Ruby Agrawal. I am North America Product Lead at Deutsche Bank, and I'll also be your moderator today. And maybe we can go around introducing someone.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sonal Kapoor. I work at Barclays Bank. I head up our U.S. high-value payments as well as faster payments.
Good morning. Erin Moore from Swift. I head up our market strategy and commercial enablement group for the Americas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Lee. I am with the Federal Reserve Financial Services. I was managing the ISO migration for the Fedwire Fund service, and I'm happy to share what's coming next.
Hi, everyone. Mihail Dura with Finastra. I head up the Global Solution Consulting payments practice for the Americas.
Okay, great. So the first question is going to be to all of you guys. So hopefully the Slido will pop up. Okay. So the first question is to you guys, and the question that is there is, what is the biggest challenge for banks and corporates in ensuring party address information is structured, accurate, and usable for cross-border payments? So I'll give you guys a minute. Okay. Yes, so I'm not surprised that D is a winner, it looks like, all of the above. So I think based off of this information, we can see that hybrid address is not just a change, it is going to be a massive undertaking that we all have to do, and so we'll talk more about that today. And so for the panelists, my first question is going to be a why. So from a compliance and interoperability perspective, why is a move away from unstructured address so important? Specifically, what risk are we seeing when the data is incomplete, inconsistent, and what we're seeing many times, artificially made compliant so it can bypass some of the system validations that are in place? So maybe, Erin, we can start from a Swift perspective.
Sure. What we've seen, of course, is data is never meant, or it was not meant to be automated. It wasn't meant to be AI compliant. We didn't even really know what AI was 50 years ago, 60 years ago with cross-border payments. So really just now we're having to change not only the data itself, but take into account the systems and the people and the processes, the operations that are handling that data. Just kind of a fun fact, which is interesting, and I don't think we're going to see a stop to how we structure data. The United States Postal Service, if you think about it, before you could send a letter on the Pony Express and it was to get to, Mr. Brown in California. It was very unstructured, unclear, that type of thing. But back in the 60s, we saw the United States Postal Service start to put some structure. For those of you that may remember, in the 60s, we started with the zip code. And then in the 80s, we saw zip +4. And then we've seen progressively more and more structure just coming in the US Postal Service. So if you think of that, you will expect the same with cross-border payments. That's pretty much, how I see that portion of the question. And then when it comes to the risks, sanctions, right? Sanction screening, that data was never meant to be sanction screened. So now we have that need for making sure that we're compliant. We have different compliance in different regions, and not only is there a need for structured data, but the interoperability, which really means the data requirements from one region, let's say the Americas, may be different from another region, let's say in Asia Pacific. But really where we need to be now is what is a minimum of data structure that we can work on, and that's really where we've seen hybrid address, right? The town and the country, just starting with a basic, the town and the country, and then getting more restrictive to fully structured.
Leslie, anything you want to add from a Fed perspective?
Yeah, so, we've been spending many years getting ready for ISO, and we've put in a lot of investment. A lot of you have, the Fed has, vendor community has, and SWIFT, everyone has. So it's really leveraging that investment that we put in. Structured data, we want to realize all of the benefits of providing that structured data. We are ready, and we're trying to enable everyone to be ready to leverage that rich data that can be carried with the payments, and ensuring that there's data quality that goes with it. That's very important. We are seeing data go through Fedwire. That's not the best practice. We see, because we have introduced the hybrid format for some of our newly added parties, we're seeing not provided in the town name, because Fedwire doesn't actually validate that it's an actual town. So, we want customers to think about, as they're getting ready for the hybrid format implementation in November, that you have good information that you're providing in the structured information, and making sure that the receiver, there could be an impact. Once the receiver gets that information, if it's not accurate and the data quality isn't there, it could generate a repair. They may even decide to return that payment. So, you want to reduce that friction.
And then, Sonam, anything from a bank perspective you want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely echo from a compliance, right? The AML monitoring, the sanction screening, that limits the bank's ability to be able to trace payment actors. But in addition to that, there's also operational impact, right? So reduced straight-through processing, there's increase and risk for operational manual intervention, where ops team has to go in and actually repair the payments if there's unstructured data. And then, of course, where there's manual intervention or operational impact, there's also increased costs. So I think it's a trifecta. There's the compliance component of it, which is a huge risk. It limits the bank's ability, but then there's also the huge operational impact, too.
No, thank you. Thank you all for the insights. I think it's clear that risk within this is very vital, but I think many of us know that risk alone does not enforce change. It's more on the regulation side. So there's the next question. In regions like Europe, the fund transfer regulation already requires address information. And we're also seeing tighter enforcements with the revised FATF 16 rule. How is regulatory pressures changing the way banks and vendors approach data quality? And so it's good that we have Mihail from the vendor side here, Finestra. So maybe we can start with you, Mihail.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank SWIFT and Fed for keep making all these changes, keeping us all busy. And I hope nobody in this room plans to take off November 16, because that's not the day to take off. And by the way, Leslie looking at me whenever she mentioned repair, that was just a coincidence.
Yeah, that was a coincidence.
In case you're wondering. So certainly we need to be agile. I mean, as I said, and Leslie and I meet on this topic just about every week. This time it's just with a bigger audience. We need to be agile. We need to be prepared. These changes are going to continue. We're part of an international standard now that is going to continue to evolve. This is no longer the old FAME format that we fully controlled and make changes every 5 years. I think we need to be prepared from a technology perspective, from operational perspective, and the larger ecosystem to really adapt to what's coming, what's going to become probably an yearly change, really. So technology is important. Vendors like Finastra play a big role in that, but it's the larger ecosystem as well, right? It's not just about the payment provider and the clearing like SWIFT, like Fed. It's really the larger ecosystem, the initiators, the compliance, the fraud, just to give some examples, the core providers as well. Everybody's part of it.
Leslie, Sonam, anything else? Just
Yeah, sure. I think regulators are obviously expecting accurate, precise data. It's really no longer a best effort, right? And I think it's shifting the mindset across the industry, but banks in particular, it's not just capture whatever the client gives us anymore. It's more of data quality control at the forefront, right? Implementing those in our digital channels right at the outset and ensuring that what we are getting from our corporate clients is structured data now, because that is what we need to be able to trace payment actors. That is what we need to be able to increase straight-through processing, reduce manual intervention. So I think these are important shifts in mindsets, not just for banks, but for vendors and the entire industry.
Leslie, any last thoughts on just regulation when it comes to Fed?
Yeah, so, we're committed and support payment transparency for the industry. The changes that Europe is making, it's coming here too. So it will impact travel rule. We're going to be on the same track to implement the recommendations as of 2030. And so we're starting that now. Last year was all about getting on ISO, and now it's all about how do we make sure we meet the requirements set forth, regulatory bodies have set forth. We were the founding members of the High Value Payment System Plus group, so we are working very closely with other market infrastructures around the world that have, the commonly used market RTGS systems to make sure that we're working collaboratively, and the way we're implementing messages in our own jurisdictions are all aligned. There's work with the Committee for Payment Market Infrastructures, CPMI. They're the execution, they execute on the recommendations provided by the G20 on making sure payments continue to be safe and secure and efficient. And one of the work streams we're focusing on, we're leading that effort at the Fed. We have a dedicated team looking at it and working on it, is specifically on cross-border payments efficiency and harmonization. So, we're very much involved, and we are committed to making sure that the industry move in that right direction.
Thank you.
I just have a comment, actually. So it's about being involved, but also being aligned. So, right, so Fedwire, right, exactly. Fedwire and CHIPS being aligned with the cross-border payments. So it's interesting, the banks in the US at least, this time we're coupled together. We're not doing ISO at different times, right? So this is where there's a change in hybrid address or a change in postal addresses for our RTGSs as well as cross-border. So that's a good thing.
No, thank you, Erin, for that. So clearly we can see that regulation is raising the bar here and the expectations and what is expected out of the industry. We will do a reality check now with our second poll, Slido question. And the question to the audience here is, how are banks and vendors changing their approach to data quality in cross-border payments? So I'll give you guys a minute. Okay, so as the answers are coming through, and it's great to see that it's the top priority. For many, data quality is a top priority. There is one assumption just with this question in general, and the assumption that is here is that the data that we're getting or that we're even beginning to use is accurate and usable, which I think is a very big assumption that we're making when we look at hybrid addresses. So the next question is, in many cases, debtor address information is pulled from legacy static data warehouses. To what extent is this a system challenge, and what changes are needed to ensure that this data is usable? So maybe we'll stick to Barclays and just your experience from a bank.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of originator data is in static data repositories, but I think it's more of an issue that the legacy system and legacy data was built when unstructured was the norm, right? It wasn't built for any sort of structured data, or that wasn't the top of mind. So I think it's changing, one, how our digital channels are, and I touched upon this earlier, how we're receiving that data from clients, right? But then that's just the top layer of it. Making sure that everything that's touching after that within the banking systems and the downstream is also updated as well, right? Because it's not just input from what we're getting from the clients, but ensuring that, you know, you're updating like format checks, for example, file mapping tools, there's real-time validation. So it's important that at the outset, what you're getting, it's kind of like best in, best out, right? So what you're getting at the outset also has to trickle down into the downstream processes, and that needs an upgrade too. So it's not just about the static data, but it's about all the systems and how they work together within the world of the bank.
Makes sense. And Mihail, from your experience on the vendor perspective?
Sure. Certainly there's many in the larger payment ecosystem that still leverage what we call legacy type products, which were never designed for hybrid address, for example. Yet November 16th is a few months away. So question to me is, will these systems be ready to provide accurate data, updated data, town and country? In some cases, probably yes. In some cases, probably no.
Yeah.
So I think tied to one of the questions we see here, there's innovation tools that are at our disposal where we can leverage to increase the quality of the data, like AI, for example. I'm sure nobody here wants to see, come November 16, in town and country, any town USA for every single address that's being provided. We want more accurate data. So I think tools like AI should and will be leveraged to increase the quality, certainly.
Thank you. So now, maybe we can shift gears from looking at bank systems to the corporates. So while some mature corporates have structured data in their master files as is today, awareness of this new requirement varies widely when we look at this, when we think about the corporate segment. How aware are corporates in general of what's changing, and what more can banks, vendors, and SWIFT do to help? So maybe, Leslie, maybe we can think about it from the Fed perspective, and then we'll go around the panelists.
You know, I think it's all about education, making sure you understand how the changes that's coming to you will impact your systems, all of your internal, your external systems. And I sound like a broken record. I do this on every drop-in session with our community. Make sure you communicate out with all the vendors, the whole entire ecosystem, because like Mihail said, we no longer, the FedWire message format, we can't control the timing of those changes anymore. We are now part of the global standard format, and anytime we make a change, we do it together to ensure interoperability, to ensure data alignment, et cetera. So it's very important. It's the institution's responsibility. You're the ones that have that relationship with your internal, external vendor community, and making sure that they're aware and should be testing with you and making those changes.
From a bank perspective?
Yeah, I think just from a perspective of a bank, I think corporate awareness is still very uneven. You're not talking about your large, sophisticated corporate clients, right? They get it, and they're more further along for the most part. It's the smaller corporate clients, and essentially there's two different pieces, right? I think what needs to be done, at least from the responsibility of the bank is go above and beyond the mass comms or the generic announcements, right? Have actionable guidance for the corporate clients tailored to your digital channels and what the clients are actually originating their payments out of. But before that, I think internal communication is important too, right? As Leslie just mentioned, internal and external, because the client, it doesn't just stop at the announcement or the communication. The client should have the same conversations with every single touch point at the bank, right? So whether that be the client talking to the relationship manager, whether it be with someone in client servicing, product, everybody internally should be aligned as to, okay, here's what's coming, here's what the changes, here's how our clients are going to be impacted. So then this way we're all speaking the same language and able to communicate that to the client when those touch points are taking place in real time, because that takes it a step further from that communication with the actionable guidance. Also I just want to add, ultimately though, I do want to say it is a shared responsibility of everybody in the ecosystem, right? It can't just be on the banks to educate the clients. The corporate clients need to educate themselves. If there are questions that they have, they should be coming and asking those questions. And then again, we all have a shared responsibility to, as Erin mentioned earlier, be in alignment.
No, thank you. And then Mehul, please educate us. What can banks and maybe what vendors can do as well?
Certainly, there's quite a few things that can be done. Now, to your original question, corporates, how aware are they of these changes? I think large corporates are typically sophisticated, very much aware, in some cases SWIFT members, right? So they definitely know what's coming. I say that when we move to corporates in the mid-market space, the awareness level goes down quite a bit, frankly. And that's where education, like Leslie says, plays a very important role. I'm willing to bet that we go down the street to the coffee shop next door and you talk to them about hybrid address, they won't know what you're saying, right? So education is important. Actually, I was recommending to Leslie, as they've done in the past, I think education series starting from the Fed, from SWIFT, are very important between now and November and beyond. Also, I think this is a first. I think Erin said it, right? SWIFT, CHIPS, Federal Reserve, all together, one date, one set of change, pretty much, in a sense. I think it's a sign of things to come. I don't think it's the last time. I think it's just the first time in a series of many events. So I think education is key, frankly. So we do talk to our customers. We do talk to financial institutions, credit unions, and stress to them how important it is that education goes beyond the bank, goes beyond the credit union, goes to upstream channels, goes to the end customer, being aware of what's required and what's coming. Now, a corporate ultimately depends on the system that they use. What can they do? But then there's work that can be done by providers like Finastra behind the scenes to help them. And I think that's what we're gonna deal with in November.
Perfect.
I'd love to share a perspective, just what I've seen from corporates, speaking with them and their banks. So if you think about it, the past year, 2 years, 3 years, we've really been focused on cross-border payments and the bank-to-bank space, and we kept telling the corporates, it's not your turn yet, it's not your turn yet, right? So now we're coming out with hybrid address. So you have some banks that think, some corporates that think, oh, this is still a bank problem. You're still focusing on that bank-to-bank portion. We're not actors yet in the play. But and it just sort of compounds when you have some banks telling their corporates, okay, there's a new requirement. When you go in and you enter your payment instructions through our portal, there's some things that are going to change. But when you send a file, it's okay, you don't need to do anything. We're going to scrub it, right? So there's mixed messages coming from the banks themselves versus the channels that they allow for their customers to enter. You have different messages where some banks are telling their corporates they don't need to do anything, and it's especially confusing when you have a multi-banked corporate, and their other bank is saying, we need you to do this, and they don't know what the requirements are, they don't know where this is coming from. So there is a bit of confusion. So, one thing that we saw last year is we did see some of the banks starting to do outreach with their customers explaining, yes, this is a bank-to-bank problem, but we rely on you for good addresses of your beneficiaries or, the other payments data that we normally collect from you, and there's some things that are changing. So there is confusion, and it starts with them, you have to tell them, you're now part of this, right? You're now an actor. It's your turn to shine and do the hard work.
And I think you all definitely emphasize the importance of industry awareness and the fact that communication and education, and I think, Mahel, to your point, getting the series back up will just bring that awareness to the industry. So awareness is, of course, important. Execution itself will be the biggest hurdle as well, as we've seen in the past. So to the next question is, even when corporates are willing to provide better data, the challenge is often on how that information is captured and transmitted through different channels. So what needs to change in digital channels and front-end systems to make it easier to submit structured data in a compliant way? Maybe someone from a bank.
Yeah, I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge is really that when these were built, when digital platforms, everything was built, it was built for unstructured, right, free text fields. So I think first and foremost, updating and right at the forefront, and I mentioned this earlier, being able to make that transition, not letting clients enter a free text field anymore and making fields mandatory, doing format checks, real-time validation, and updating front-end design. But also, in addition to that, I think it's important to note that it's not just the file, because again, portals, host to host, all of this, it was built where unstructured was the norm, and now it's not, and that's going to require a change. And then to Erin's point, depending on what channel you're using, if you're entering it in, it has to be mandatory. But some banks are mapping it in the back end where, okay, if you're still not entering it, we'll do it for you. It is very confusing. So I think alignment from that perspective, from a bank, just updating everything in the front end, but then also ensuring that, everything that we're doing is nudging the corporates into compliance, right? So what does that look like? Warnings, prompts, having any sort of error messages pop up in real time, so that'll nudge the clients to actually provide the data that you're looking for, in addition to updating, client guides too. Let's not forget about that. It's not just a tech change, but again, going back to education, so educating new clients as to what's mandatory versus what's not and how they can play their part.
Thank you, thank you. Anything else maybe from a vendor perspective? Leslie, Erin from Fed, Chip?
Sure, and I'm looking at the questions. Vivian, by the way, I don't know who Vivian is, great questions. One thing I do want to say, it's definitely important to be ready for November. I know I asked Leslie a couple of weeks ago, point blank, so what happens if a financial institution is not ready November 16, providing town and country? The answer was very direct and simple. That message will be rejected. It's that simple. So that's how important it is to be ready for that day, providing the data. To your question, I think the answer is ISO. We have a standard. Let's use it. And let's use it beyond payment providers like Finastra and the Fed and SWIFT. Let's use it all the way upstream to initiations channels, to ERP systems, all the way up to corporates. That's what I think is key. Let's use the standard that we have because it gives us what we need. I think that's going to be key to be successful in time for this year and beyond.
Thank you. Anything else to add?
Sure. We focused a little bit on the front end capture of the data, but if you even think more further, we've focused a lot on corporates. But think about if you're going to make a payment cross-border as a consumer, a retail customer. Typically, in the U.S., there are some banks that allow cross-border payments to be initiated through a portal, through an app. But more often, it's a customer asking information about, let's say they want to be paid. They go into their bank and they say, I need to be paid. What do I tell my customer that wants to pay me? What information do I give them? And they're handed a slip of paper. Or they go onto the bank website to get the information on how it needs to be structured. So it's even thinking beyond the portals or the file exchanges. It comes down to the very hands-on manual processes of those papers or posting that on the website too. And then in addition to that, the validation. So you can have a customer writing down an address, but are you validating it now while the customer is entering it in, putting it on the paper, putting it in the portal? Or are they hitting the send button and then that payment gets rejected or it comes back to them a day later for repair? Well, at that point in time, they've already missed their due date, right? So just more thinking about data models and data capture and pre-processing is super important, especially with hybrid address and fully structured.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, so let's see how all these insights align to the real world with your experience today, which we will do our last Slido question today, for this session at least, which is, what has been your experience with hybrid and structured data so far? And if it's nothing, I guess it's nothing. Okay, as the answers come, okay, still seeing a lot of unstructured data, which is not good, probably. But there's a long road ahead, right? And I think this provides a snapshot of where we are today, but as we approach the November 2026 timelines, which is fast approaching, it's inevitable that we need to get it right and that we must avoid the friction. So with that comes my next question, which is, to Mihail, your point, we have the ISO 20022 standards. We have the experience that we've had over the past few years. It also highlighted the need for an ecosystem readiness and the collaboration. So what lessons from that experience are helping us ensure a hybrid compliant address in one region is accepted without friction in another, and just in general, maybe lessons learned that we all globally can abide by? And we can start with Erin on the Swift side.
Sure. In terms of lessons learned, so let's just take a look back not very many months ago when we moved away from MT to the MX version of our cross-border payments messages. So in terms of Swift, what do we do to make that a success? I mean, the most obvious, we keep talking about the education, making it clear that these are the standards, these are the usage guidelines, this is what needs to be done. Awareness around the timelines, when it's due, that type of thing. Webinars, educational type of engagements with our professional services teams, okay, right? We did a great job, and what was surprising is if you look back, we did not anticipate that with cross-border payments that we would see 97 plus, right? 97 plus of cross-border payments that are put on SWIFT are ISO native, ISO compliant. So what we're going to do, at least now, what we're doing is repeating those same things that we did for success. The difference between now and what we had to do with just migrating to a new payment standard, the difference is now Leslie and I are joined at the hip where you've got the Fedwire and the CHIPS piece that are aligned with SWIFT, so that's different. The other thing I'd like to point out is we sort of have this grace period for a year, right? So right now, you have data coming in as fully unstructured. We've already introduced the concept of hybrid, so banks can use a hybrid address with the town and the country, and they can also use fully structured. So we get multiple choice questions for a little bit. You know, you get that grace period, but it's only for a year and that will shut down. But you know, that's the secret of our success, is kind of looking back in history, what we've done and why we were successful, and highlighting, you know, some changes or differences that are hopefully going to get us there.
And Leslie, it's good to know that you and Erin are now joined at the hip and aligned with SWIFT, but any lessons learned just based on your prior experience at the Fed?
I think it's a common theme. It's all about education. You know, the vendor community and SWIFT and CHIPS and us, we've been communicating and educating, making sure, that was the biggest lessons learned that we received from our community as a feedback, that we need to do more and often and frequently. So that is our plan, making sure that everyone is aware about the November 16th. We're going live, and we've communicated that we will be going live with CHIPS and SWIFT when they make their change. Another feedback that we received is related to testing, having robust testing approaches. We didn't require peer-to-peer testing, but the feedback we received was very valuable, that this was one of the best ways to prove that the changes everyone's making is going to work when we go live. So the Fed is going to facilitate more peer-to-peer testing, make it a little more structured over the summer to ensure that the customers and the ecosystem will be ready for the change.
Great. Any final thoughts, Mihail, Sonam?
Well, from a vendor perspective, certainly I think coordination, it's key, one of the lessons learned, right? And we coordinate with SWIFT, with Federal Reserve, with CHIPS. I think more of that needs to happen more often, as early as possible. One piece of advice for everybody in the room, I would look at your systems right now, starting with the payment systems, your other ancillary solutions, whether it's in the compliance space, fraud, and find out as early as possible their level of readiness and their plan to be ready for November. You certainly don't want to be in June, July, August, and only then sort of have those conversations. I think the earlier, the better. It seems like a long time, but in our experience, I don't think between now and November it's a long time given all the changes that need to be made. So I think that would be one thing I would add, yeah.
Ruby, could I attack the first two questions? I'd love to tackle those. How prevalent is the use of AI to collect and properly assign data, as well as screening tools for data accuracy? So I do want to drop one statistic for you. So what we saw after the migration in November was we determined 20% of cross-border payment messages had some version of structured postal address. So that was interesting, right? 20%. But then we've seen a bump up now to nearly 30%. And the feedback that we've gotten is that the larger institutions were using AI. And then there was a second question in here about, are there initiatives to help the debtor's agent obtain the creditor's city and store it so the debtor can use it if desired? So at least with SWIFT, what we have, right, it's not the perfect tool, but it's something for our community to use, is we do have an open AI tool where our customers can put files through or free format postal addresses, and it will extract the town and the country, and then give you a confidence score. So that can be layered in to help you as you prepare for the due date.
Well, thank you for those statistics. It's always good to hear SWIFT stats. It's the thing I look forward to every month. Okay, so I think we're pretty, we can talk about hybrid address, I'm sure, for hours and hours, but I'm sure you guys don't want that. But to wrap everything up today with maybe a pretty little hybrid bow, what is the single most important thing each part of the ecosystem, so be it banks, vendors, SWIFT, and corporates, need to get right to avoid compliance friction and payment disruption as we head into November 2026? Mihail, we can start with you, and then maybe we can go around
Sure.
the panel.
Well, kind of reiterating what I said before, start now. If you haven't started already, make a plan. Make sure you have a plan that gets you compliant in November. Don't wait another day. I would say start now.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, it's really important. We don't have much time. When we did the ISO migration, we had many years, and we even delayed and gave industry like 4 extra months to do it. And I said it earlier, we controlled that in the past. We don't control the timeline anymore, and so we have to play nice with everybody. And I think the prior panel, somebody said it's a team sport. It really is. We all have to do our part, and having a plan will get you there. Making sure you're having conversations with all of your internal stakeholders, your external vendor community, whoever you're working with to support your payment business, your wire operations. That conversation needs to happen, and come up with a plan to be ready and test as much as possible.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, I would say it's really about rethinking your data models. We are moving away from a standard A to a standard B. That's not what hybrid address is about, or structuring addresses. It's about rethinking data models, right? How you're capturing that data And this is not going to be the last change around address, right? It could be in a year or 2 years, we see things around category purpose of payment. So stepping back, thinking about the data that's going to go in those messages, that's really important. And I would say, don't just do this incrementally to check the box. Really think about this in a more long-term vision.
Yeah, if I had to boil it down, I guess, to one thing, I would say every player needs absolute clarity and execution, right? We all play a piece of the puzzle and play our part in the ecosystem, and I think as long as each player is playing their part and ensuring that it's accurate, then that's how you have frictionless payments, right? So banks are going to operationalize it, vendors are going to enable it, SWIFT is going to standardize it, clients are going to populate it. So we all have to do our part.
No, so thank you. I think from today's discussion, we can definitely tell that hybrid address is going to be an ecosystem evolution. ISO is not coming to an end, and this is just the next phase of it, which we all need to be prepared. And I'll quote Mihail to you and Leslie, start now. Time is running fast, and everyone within the ecosystem needs to start today. So with that, I see the buzzer has come, and I want to thank the panelists for the time and insightful discussions, and thank you all for your engagement. Hope you all enjoy the lunch, and thank you for this discussion.
Thank you.